Good evening. My name is Gerald Hodges, and I am the Community Inclusion Coordinator for the City of Grand Prairie. And I am excited about tonight because tonight is progress. Coach Mason Broadley of the Dallas Heat, a professional basketball team that plays in the minor league EBA, came to us wanting to do a community unity project with the City of Grand Prairie. Well, after meeting with Coach Mason Broadley, we then went and presented the idea to Chief Daniel Cesney of the Grand Prairie Police Department. Chief Cesney was emphatically on board and invited the players to join them in the Adopt a Street program. The Adopt a Street program is a program where police officers literally have been cleaning the streets for years, picking up trash in the Dalworth community. So after joining the police officers in the Adopt a Street program, the players and police officers are going to sit down for an open dialogue at a roundtable discussion. It is fair for players in this climate to have questions, and even more commendable for them to want to be part of the solution. When two of the most influential people in uniform come together, it can only benefit the community. Pro athletes plus police officers equal progress. And so now, moderating this event, my dear friend, Pastor Stanley Smith.
Good evening. Great to be here today under the Dallas Heat Police Roundtable agenda. And I'm going to be the moderator, and we're going to try to work through this and have a good time and try to work out some things that see how we can better our communities along with the world. The world needs it. The roundtable discussion, the purpose is the community inclusion coordinator is Gerald Hodges, who's to my left. I'm going to be the moderator, and I am Pastor Smith from Faith Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church here in Grand Prairie, Texas. I've been a pastor over there for about 13 years. Great community, the Westchester community. Worked with Gerald on many occasions. Been around Chief on many occasions, and we just have the best police department in the world, so I want y'all to make sure y'all know that. We are awesome to be appointed, be around these guys, and these guys are doing well in the community. I'm going to introduce our panelists. First, we have the Dallas Heat, and the owner, I just met him, Mr. Mason Brownlee, the owner of the Dallas Heat. Been the owner for 4 years, and the EBA starting in 2021. Amen. And we have his players here. If they could just wave their hand when I call them. Andre Thomas, who's a guard for 4 years. Ricardo Artis, the second, who's a forward for 2 years. And Cameron Barnes, who's a guard for 3 years, and Detarius Kirk, who is a combo guard for 2 years. Good to have you guys here. Now introduce the Grand Prairie Police Department, who we have, again, the best chief of police in the United States, Chief Daniel Cesney, Chief of Grand Prairie Police Department. He's to my right. We have the Detective Jeff Sunza. There he is right there. He's the finance crimes for 6 years. We have Officer Kyle Logan, who is traffic for 14 years. There he is over there. And we have Takesha Dye, who's school resource officer and detective for 8 years. Okay, and then we have Officer Robert Paulett, the second, who's a school resource officer for 10 years. All right. Did I miss anybody?
I'm sure glad on the intros that they didn't put our heights like they did the Dallas Heat off to the side of our name, because we would have been off by a little bit, I think, Pastor.
All right. I'm going to read the rules that we will have, and again, want to thank you for coming to discuss. This is awesome. I think the world needs to do that. I think every city needs to do this. Sit down and talk about some things and look at each other's, the way we view things. Here we go. The question will be directed to the officers and or the players. After the question is answered, anyone can add the follow-up question or comment. Officers will have most of the question because the officers wanted to ensure that they are answered as many questions that we have as possible. So we'll just go around, and as I go through these questions, I'll say this is the question for the officer, or this is the question for the players, and then you will respond. And feel free. We need to lay it out. This question is for the officers, and we're going to start with the head, the big man, Chief Daniel. It said, qualified immunity. What is your stance on it, and do you feel in today's climate it is necessary to have?
Well, first of all, before I get started, I want to thank everyone for being here. It means a lot to me that the Dallas Heat would come out here and stand shoulder to shoulder with the officers. And what most people don't know that are watching this is just before we came here, we just did a community service project that they asked to join us on. That was on their own initiative, and it's because they truly care about their community. So it is exciting for us to have a relationship with this team. Our relationship goes beyond just tonight. And so I say to you, coach and owner, thank you. I also think it's relevant, before we get started, to thank the real big man, Pastor Smith, for moderating tonight. The way we do it in Grand Prairie is to include our faith, and for having you here, it means a lot to me personally, and I know all of our officers and players. Okay, qualified immunity. So before I weigh in on exactly my position is, I think it's important to remind people what qualified immunity really is, because I've been getting a lot of questions about it, and what I think there's a misunderstanding that qualified immunity means that an officer can do something criminal in nature and not be prosecuted because they're immune or there's some type of immunity. That is not correct. So qualified immunity has absolutely nothing at all to do with whether or not there's a criminal prosecution. Any officer that does something criminal in nature, that case is filed in the grand jury, with the district attorney, just like any other citizen, and a citizen grand jury looks at the facts and determines whether or not to indict the officer for criminal wrongdoing. Qualified immunity has to do with civil liability. In other words, can you sue a police officer personally for the actions that they did? It's about dollars and cents. It's also important to understand that qualified immunity is not something that is automatically given to the officer. That is false. The only person that can determine whether or not an officer receives qualified immunity is a judge. The judge, an impartial judge, looks at the facts and circumstances and decides whether or not that officer would be entitled to qualified immunity. The basic framework that the judges typically look at is would another officer in a similar set of circumstances behave the same way? If the answer is yes, then they may qualify for immunity. If the answer is no, they're acting outside the bounds of the norm, they would not be qualified, subject to qualified immunity in most cases by the judge, and therefore they would be subject to civil liability where they can be sued. So as it relates to my personal opinion, I think qualified immunity is an important tool, and let me explain. It balances between two important principles. One, it holds government officials accountable for wrongdoing financially. That's important. And that's where the judge would look at the circumstances I mentioned and said, nope, that officer is not entitled to qualified immunity because their actions are outside the norm. They deserve to at least take that case in front of a judge or a jury to determine whether or not they should be civilly liable. But the other part of this is imagine officers being subject to being sued for anything and everything they do. Anytime they make an arrest, anytime they do a traffic stop, anything. If they're operating within the norms of what you expect as citizens, do you really want your officers subjected to that harassment on every interaction? Because that's literally what could happen. That tool in the law enables your police officers to operate within the framework of the law and provide you, the citizens, the safety that you deserve. So I just think it's important to understand no one is saying that officers are immune from prosecution. That has nothing to do with qualified immunity. You've seen in the media and other places where officers, even locally, are prosecuted for criminal wrongdoing. Totally different than qualified immunity.
All right. Thank you, Chief. If anyone have any additional thoughts on that, want to ask, be free.
There's no way I answered that question so thoroughly that nobody has a question.
All right.
I want everybody to understand, and I think it's important to underscore a point here, nothing's off limits. I want you to ask the tough questions. That's why we're here. Because I think that if our citizens get to know us as individuals and how we think and the way that we believe here in Grand Prairie, I think a lot of the trouble that we see in other parts of the country, it'll go away. So our team is here. Nothing's off limits. Ask the questions.
This is a time where you might ask a question that somebody else is already wanting to ask. So let's get involved. Let's ask the question if you feel or answer it. Okay. This question is for the officers again. Any officer can respond to this, or do y'all want me to pick you out and call you out to do it? All right, here's the question. Do you feel cops in general can be more vocal publicly when there are wrongdoings by fellow police departments, or do you feel there will be too much backlash not to follow the blue code? Who wants to answer that? One of the officers.
Don't be bashful, guys. I'll get it if you don't want it, but I'd rather one of you answer it.
I'll start off. I think, in general, I think in the current climate, officers are speaking up more publicly with the current events that have happened recently. I think either way, when you're looking at the profession, we also have to be careful in the sense of when you're speaking out, because we do serve the greater good of the public. And so certain opinions, I think you have to be mindful of that. Not to say that, hey, what was put out there is wrong, but I think as officers, if you say it in a way that speaks to the facts and it is tasteful in a sense, I think, yeah, there is going to be backlash on either side of it. You may get some cops that say, hey, it's a blue code. Well, maybe you shouldn't speak against that. And then you may have some community members that probably give you backlash if you do speak against it. So I think either way, we're in a position that sometimes it's hard to speak on the facts of what other departments are going through. So we just have to be mindful in that. But I do think, to answer your question, that, yeah, I think cops now are more publicly speaking out about the events that are taking place.
Very good. Anybody else would like to add their thoughts?
I'll go. I guess my question in regards to, I guess the blue code, or what it would be publicly perceived as, would be like when said events like the George Floyd event. Is there a certain person within the department, I would guess, that would speak to all on duty, or I guess all branches of your department, to kind of let everybody know what's going on and how you guys publicly stand on it as a unit to then address, the city of Grand Prairie, and so the citizens at least know, exactly what their protectors feel or what their stance would be on such an event.
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. I think even just to touch on the George Floyd event, we did do that. I think Chief Cesney handled that, where as a department, we did have kind of a briefing and to talk about, hey, this is where we stand as a department, and then we talk about it, but then he released the video about where we stand as a department and as a community and what we're going to do as a department to continue to make sure that we are safeguarding the lives of those in our community. So yeah, we do have those type of meetings where we talk about it and then put our stance out there for our community to understand where we stand on those ideas.
Very good. Chief, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, I agree with Takesha to the letter. Look, I think it's important that when officers see evil, they speak to it. I think that nobody hates a dirty cop more than a good cop. And so part of our moral code here and our moral fabric is to have a badge that shines brightly and is not tarnished. And part of how we do that is by speaking truth to evil. In the George Floyd case, as you brought up, our department was very vocal about the outrage in that case. Right down to the officer, you can't find one that would, I suspect, that would agree with the actions of that officer. It was deplorable. And I felt that it was very important to put out a video to echo the sentiments of our team, because I can't see anything in that video that justifies that behavior. So yes, I think you'll also see that speaking nationally, there's a shift. In the old days, a lot of police executives were uncomfortable speaking to issues that were still under investigation or speaking in on somebody else's business. And there's still value in some of that. If you don't understand all the facts, it is not advisable to speak out, because any detective will tell you that a lot of these cases, there's a lot more to the story. That case in particular, however, is captured on video, and it is. I don't think you'll find anyone that can tell you that keeping your knee on an individual's neck for 8 minutes is an acceptable police practice. So I think you're seeing more and more of that. More and more people speaking that is.
All right, very good. This question is for the players. As a pro athlete, do you believe sitting out protesting for one game has an impact on the cause? And if so, why?
I feel like sitting out, I don't believe it helps the cause at all. If anything, I feel like it draws more attention for you to do something. And in the case of our professional, our higher class professional athletes, when you say you're going to go out and, play a game for a cause, and then you stop the game for that cause, I feel like it causes more confusion than it does understanding. So I feel like stopping a game, for what you're doing for really entertainment purposes, I feel like is doing a disservice to people that are using it as a getaway tool. And for those that look up to you, I feel they kind of get a mixed message. And just as Chief said, without them very understanding exactly what's going on, except for the fact that, you're skipping out on a game and not really giving the full reason why, or giving the half, sides of the story, can kind of cause a disgruntled bunch, and then also, again, more mass confusion.
Okay. Anyone else would like to add to that? Any other players would like to speak on that?
Personally, I feel like they're sitting out one game or just sitting out in general can help, but there has to be some method behind it. The biggest thing is, what's the method? Like, what are you sitting out for, and what are you working toward getting achieved. So like, for example, what happened in the NBA, our higher price athletes, like you mentioned, they sat out for a game, and behind the scenes, they're working with owners and people in power to be able to make moves, literally, to be able to try to make change, be able to get into, whether it's different police, get into different police departments in these communities, people of power, to help influence change. So they're using their, I feel like as professional athletes, even at our level, we can use our platform in a multitude of ways. Sometimes, certain situations, maybe sitting out may not be necessarily the best way, but I do believe as long as there's method behind it, there's a reason for it, and you're doing something behind that, it can be a tool that's utilized, because people are watching. The whole world sees you, and they want to know why. It brings attention with why, like Mason mentioned, why. You're asking why, and it sparks that conversation even more. I think it can help in a way.
Very good. Good point. Anyone else? Okay, this question is for the officers, and we have a limited time, so we're gonna speed up the questions. Okay. This question is for the officers. What are your protocols as pertaining to utilization of weaponry when in an encounter with a suspect?
You want me to grab that?
You got it.
Okay. So our use of force standard is the least amount of force reasonably necessary. Full stop. Okay? So understand that when it comes to which tools our officers are using, they're using the tool that can least amount they can use to get the job done, subdue the subject. It's important to understand that for us, that looks like a wheel. And if you need this tool, you just reach out and grab it. What I want to make sure and differentiate, and what I'm hearing a lot about is people feel as though officers should be working their way up a ladder, which sort of kind of makes sense when you think about it, from lowest to highest, until an officer starts taking fire, for instance. If an officer is under fire, I'm sure you would not expect them to use a verbal challenge or to try to use pepper spray while they're under fire. Under those circumstances, they can move straight to using a weapon of deadly force. On the other hand, if the person is only being verbally combative and they're not following instructions, it would be insane for an officer to use that high level of force, right? So our goal is to ensure that officers are properly trained in the use of force, and that they use the least amount necessary. And not just that, but after they facilitate the arrest and that the person is in custody, everything gets de-escalated, calm down, talk to the individual, make sure they're okay, they don't need anything, and try to bring everything back calm again. Did that answer the question?
Anybody want to make a follow-up? You look like you do.
Well, I guess what are like the psychological stipulations with using a weapon? Because sometimes cops, from multiple videos I've seen, is shoot first before they can, or they're so fearful of what may happen that they shoot first. So what's the training to that?
So the direct answer to that is there is no training that shoot first. But let me unpack what your broader concern is, okay? And I know I'm supposed to be short on time, but you're just going to have to indulge me for a second, because this is an important question that needs to be properly answered. If I'm a protester in 1965 and all I want is to be able to drink from the same drinking fountain, eat at the same restaurant, sit on the same place on the bus, and I go out to peacefully protest, and a police officer is using a German Shepherd to bite me, I'm probably going to go home that night and tell my kids not to trust the police. And everyone here would do the same thing, okay? That child then grows up and sees the way that Rodney King was beaten. That then adult is probably going to tell their children not to trust the police. We all agree so far? Okay. That child then grows up and sees the way some of the things that are going on in today's society and they are remembering what their mom and their grandmother or their grandfather said to them, okay? Now, you're probably told in those circumstances with people that have endured that type of bias, be careful. Because if you get stopped by the police, to use your analogy, they shoot first, I think is what you said, right?
Yeah.
Or at least the videos you saw. So now I want you to think about this. Police officer stops a car because the taillight's out.
Right.
Something very benign. The officer walks up to the car and sees a driver that is scared out of their mind. Why are they scared? Because their entire family for generations has seen things that help them arrive at that opinion of the police, right? And it goes back a long way, sins of our fathers. But now flip the coin for a second. You're a police officer. You walk up to the car, you're just stopping the car because there's a taillight out. And you see somebody who is afraid out of their mind and their actions aren't matching the taillight. So as an officer, you're thinking, wait a minute, this is unusual. Why is this person so afraid behind a taillight if the officer doesn't understand the history? Can you understand how that sets us on a collision course? That's my concern. So I can't speak for other cops in the country, but what I can tell you is that this mask that we all wear because of COVID-19 is doing more danger than you realize. Because when a Grand Prairie police officer pulls up to you because your taillight's out, we like to smile. When you see an officer smiling, are you afraid? Probably not. But behind this, it's very difficult to show ourselves as human beings. So to answer your question, I think the answer is we have to be more mindful of where we've come from as police officers. We have to understand our ugly history. We have to be part of the solution and showing our citizens that while there's this ugly past, that's not who we are. Remember, if you go to Chili's tonight and you have a bad experience, and I've never had a bad experience at Chili's, I love Chili's, okay, but let's just say, you're probably not going to have an issue with Applebee's tomorrow. But in policing, everyone that wears this uniform gets judged by everyone else that wears this uniform. So my ask to you and to everyone watching is judge your police department based on your local police department. Because when we see those videos that you brought up too, we don't like them either, because that's not an accurate reflection on us. So I can't speak for other departments, but I can tell you in Grand Prairie, you should feel comfortable because we work for you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a follow-up?
Quick question. And to the point, I think it was very well explained and asked on both sides. I would just say to those certain videos, or not even the videos, but just encounters, what are cops taught when they're dealing with a deadly weapon? Are they taught to shoot to kill, or are they taught to shoot to basically disarm? Or
neither. Police officers are taught to shoot to stop the threat, just like we do all uses of force. So under no circumstance would a police officer ever shoot to kill. Now sometimes that's the byproduct. If you have somebody that's shooting at you, coach, you want to stop that threat as quickly as possible. So shot placement is important, right? I know you don't want your police officers being killed in the line of duty. We want our officers to go home. So the goal is always stop the threat.
I guess I'm a little confused on that too, because like the most recent thing that happened where the dude was, I guess, supposedly reaching in his car where they say for a knife, and the officer shot him 7 times. I guess that's where I'm confused on. Is there any type of psychological training for that? I feel like there's no way you should have to shoot someone 7 times. You know, I mean, if anything, once, if that, but like that's why I'm kind of confused. Is there any training behind that, or?
Yeah, it is very difficult for me to weigh in on the procedures of another department, right?
Cool.
And so particularly one that is just getting all this media scrutiny, you know, the last thing I want to do is weigh in on facts that all I've seen in the news, right? So it's not fair to the decedent or the people involved in the case, rather, and the officers and their families. But I will tell you that people with knives kill police officers. And I can also tell you that I've seen a number of videos where men or women are chasing officers with knives. In fact, there's one that's really famous that's out right now where the officer shoots the individual. He gets up, grabs another officer, puts the knife to his neck, and that officer, again, it just shot after shot is not stopping that threat. So I don't want to specifically talk about that case, but what I would tell you is the goal should always be you only use force to stop the threat. If the threat is still advancing, then maybe it's 8, 9, 10 shots. If the threat stops at 1 shot, then it stops. And that's the benchmark. There is no training to the officers to say, you do X number of shots, because every situation is different. Shot placement is different. Facts and circumstances are different. And it would be to ask our officers to be able to, under that level of stress, while your life is on the line, to be able to do like Clint Eastwood does and shoot a gun out of someone's hand, it is just not a realistic option. Any of the officers want to add on that? No? Yeah, Kyle?
I got something. I think recently, social media is so crazy right now, but a lot of my friends have asked me, why don't y'all just shoot him in the leg or shoot him in the arm? And my response is, there's main arteries that run through your leg too. So by shooting someone in the leg, if you don't get a tourniquet on there within 60 seconds, they're dead. So I just, when we're put in these situations and shots are fired, like he said, we're trying to go home, and shooting a gun out of somebody's hand or shooting someone in the leg or the arm is, to me, just not possible, and it's not realistic. So.
Very good.
And even I want to say, even if that was the case, where you were to shoot someone in the leg who has a gun or a knife, and let's say they have a gun and you shoot them in the leg, that's not necessarily going to stop them from shooting at you.
Right.
See what I'm saying? So, like Chief said, it's about stopping the threat. So there are a lot of factors that go into a situation, and one of the best things that you can do for any situation is to mentally prepare yourself to go through those situations. When I was coming up, when I was getting trained, my FTOs told me, imagine a situation, think about how you would react to that, what you would do. Because unless you train yourself to go through a situation, unless you practice something mentally over and over again, when you get into that situation, if you're not familiar with that thing,
Right.
you're not going to know what to do. You're going to freeze, you're going to run, you don't know what to do. So it's important to prepare yourself mentally to think through those things, and that's one of the advantages I think that I learned as coming up as an officer is you have to be able to go through those circumstances, and not everything is going to be cut and dry, not everything is going to happen the way you think is going to happen, but it's important to be able to react in the appropriate way.
Now, do you think that's something that you have to just do individually, or is that something that a whole police department can do as a whole?
Both. Like I said, you guys practice your craft all the time, but I'm sure you do things as a team as well as individually. So it's the same thing with us. Our profession is no different as far as training goes. You have to be able to do those things a certain way. We go to the gun range and train. There are classes that we take. Di's a detective, the classes that she has to take and things that she has to learn to be able to do her job. So those are it just depends on the situation. Right. But you always have to get yourself in a position to where you can respond as appropriately as possible.
Yeah, speaking of just training in general, I think our police department does a great job of making us do at least 40 hours every 2 years. But the biggest thing is just like as you guys are professional athletes, you see a new move on TV or you see some kind of crossover or some kind of defensive stance, whether it be a mental rep or whether it be you guys trying to figure out how am I going to stop this move. For us, it's the same thing. It's always wanting to get better, always wanting to learn. I think that's one of the most important things becoming a cop is never settling. The best basketball players in the world, You know, Kevin Durant, you know, they said it, you know, I'm constantly learning. I want to get better. And he's one of the best shooters in the league. He's one of the best scorers in the league. But the most humbling thing is I want to get better. So for cops, for us, that's important to us. Training is very important to us. I think the moment we settle, the moment we stop training is the moment we do our community, ourselves, or our partner a disservice. The moment you stop practicing, you stop showing up to the gym, you do your teammate a disservice. Now he's slacking up on help side defense, you know what I mean? And I think that's the biggest thing that we got to take away is our training is different from y'all's training, but it's just as important in order for us to become better. Officer Logan, he trains all the time, whether it be just riding that bike, and he rides that bike 10 hours a day. But you could see him in the parking lot bobbing and weaving. You know what I mean? For me, filing a case, we get training on it every day, interviewing somebody. And I think it's just important to understand that our training never stops and never succeeds. And it's big for us to always want to make, our last case, not as good as our next case, because we want that next case to be the best. We want that last game to improve on. We want to improve on that move. We want to improve on scoring 10 points a game. You know what I mean? And I think there's often a misunderstanding of how much we train. Just to become a cop, it takes, for our police department, you got to do 6 months of just academic work and situational awareness and scenarios. And then from that 6 months of 40 hours a week, then you ride out with an FTO, and that FTO trains you for another 6 months. And then just like what we do on a daily basis, we constantly learn every call, mental reps. You get a call notes, you're training as you're getting to that call. I'm gonna respond this way because this may happen. Okay, if that doesn't happen, I'm gonna respond this way. So training is huge for us. And the moment that we stop training, the moment we stop wanting to become better, the moment that we become a hindrance to the person next to us and even to our families to an extent. So I think I can't say enough to our department and how much we want to train. And the moment we settle is where it's detrimental for everybody around.
Very good. And some of these questions, again, that you're asking, and it's kind of amazing that I'm gonna ask these questions, and some of you are answering. This is great. This is great. This is great. Here's a question for the officers again. What we were just talking about, what Chief was just talking about. What ways do the city police department plan on being more deliberate in integrating themselves within the community, being a part of the community? What's going on with that, Chief?
Well, I can tell you that we have been one with our community for some time. So you know that. That is just not the flavor of the day for us. We've got everything from Unidos, midnight basketball, cops and kids fishing. Samaritan Feet was one of my favorites, where we're putting shoes on the feet of children. We just got through collectively doing the Adopt a Street out here, picking up trash in our community because they deserve it. But I'm not kidding you. We have over 40 different programs we do. We have a juvenile justice program. We're trying to keep kids off the wrong path and get them back on the right path. Help mentoring program. There is a ton of things that we do. Having said that, to Detective Sanza's point, we're not done. There's always something that we can do better and more. So we have a new community inclusion coordinator, and he and I are working on a new program. I don't want to peel back the curtain just yet, but the nuts and bolts are going to be to try to help people in more of our impoverished areas to get some more dollars and cents in their back pocket, and I'm excited about that. But that's just one thing. Look, at Grand Prairie Police, community policing isn't just a program. It's not just something that we walk around and talk in the barbershops or drink coffee, although we do those too. It's part of who we are. It's part of our moral fabric, because There's really good reasons for it. Number one, if our community trusts us, they're going to pick up the phone and call us when they need us. If they don't pick up the phone and call us when they need us, that means that crook is going to go victimize someone else. So that's critical that we have that partnership. But here's the other part. It's great for us too. Imagine if your whole job is to go from call to call to call and see the difficulties in the community, and that's it. Just the criminals and the crooks and the worst. If you don't have that mental reset by doing things that give back, I want you to think about something. Imagine standing next to a kid when he catches his first fish ever in his life. Imagine that joy on their face, and they'll always remember that standing next to a police officer. That is something for us that we will never forget. And that's a program we have at Cops and Kids Fishing. So it's just as important for us as it is for everyone else. I'm going to be honest with you, that's part of what makes us tick. So yeah, we got a lot of things, but it's because we enjoy it so much.
Very good. Just before we go on to that, because this is dealing with the players, and it's basically the same thing. Let's see what we come with this, with what you would say. It says, what can athletes do in the local communities and hometowns to open discussions with the community and local government and law officials? What can you do?
I think one thing that we can do is, as players, also be, for example, before we came here, doing cleaning the streets and stuff like that, being more involved with the police department so that people in the community can see that. I mean, we have people in the community that look like us, that know us, and they feel comfortable with us. And if they don't feel comfortable with police officers, but they see us with them, it's like, okay, like that police department may not be that bad, or it may change their perception. So now us being seen with the police department is very important. And then on top of that is when we do have interaction with the community, speaking highly on that. There are a lot of programs in here that I wasn't aware of. And I think that even pushing some of these kids or pushing people in the community toward these programs to fill these programs up or to help create other programs where the police department, like they're doing now, help out with the kids and everything like that. I think that's something that we can do in our immediate community. You know, and that's really, to me, that's our job. That's what we need to do.
I got something to add to that too. As well as Mason has set up before, we had a superhero night for kids, and everyone bring out their kids to the community, and we just interact with the kids. He brought out mascots and everything. We can do stuff like that as far as we went and picked up trash. Most locals came outside to watch everybody and look at everybody interacting, speaking to those. They had their kids out. Some people even came to actually help out, speak to them, take pictures with them, and everyone just interacting with someone, just talking to someone, talking to kids, taking pictures with kids. They go to school, tell their friends tell their moms tell their dads come out to the community, and everybody just come together and doing something. And I didn't know that you guys had all those activities as well, neither. So with you guys having that and spreading joy around the community, and you guys are way more interactive in the community than I ever seen a police department do. You guys are just doing awesome to me. And bringing people out more, it's just great to see all that. And then as far as athletes, you have little kids that look up to professional athletes. They watch the athletes now and then. When they come to see other athletes who actually play basketball, they ask questions, and they see us hanging out with you guys or interacting with you guys, and they just look up to both.
Break it down in the simplest form, it just basically spread love. Love conquers all, so that's it.
Amen.
I think it's important that, as what you said, is that when you come together, for instance, you made a good point, Chief, when the kid catches his first fish and he's standing by a police officer. That's a positive. When you athletes, the pro athletes, and you guys come around and the kid catches the first fish with you, or whatever it is in the community, you stop from your area and interact with the children, the kids, and the families in the neighborhood. I think this is where Grand Prairie, I love about them, is the programs they have is tremendous. tonight is tremendous. You volunteered to come to have a round table with them. I think the whole nation need to have a round table, don't you? Okay, let's go on. This question is for the officers. Let me address Chief on this one because it's in his line of work. It said, what type of professional and personal skill does it take to succeed at the type of work? Now, you might want to pass it on, but
any one of our officers can handle this question easily, but I would tell you just real quick before I pass the torch, the most important attribute is high moral character. Full stop. It's the most important attribute. I will tell you that a partial second that I like is I like officers that understand what it's like to be hungry. I mean hungry. If you know what it's like to be truly hungry, when you encounter somebody that's in a dark spot, you understand empathy a little bit better. And when I say the word hungry, I'm not talking about determination, although that's important too, but I'm talking about somebody who's stealing a loaf of bread because they're starving is not the same thing as somebody that's stealing a loaf of bread because, or a box of baby formula that they're going to eBay, right? It's not the same thing. And we want our team to understand and do the difference between the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. Because again, just because it's in black and white, the lawmakers can't take every circumstance into account. And that's why they count on us to make decisions with our judgment to do the right thing. So again, high moral character is key, understanding empathy, and I like cops that have been hungry. Okay, I'm passing it off.
That's why I think our officers need a raise.
You want to add anything?
I think to do this profession, you just have to be willing to believe in something bigger than yourself. Because this job is not about us every day just putting on the uniform. It's about being a part of the bigger picture. We come here to make our community better, our department better, and to make sure that everybody in our community feels safe. And so you have to be personable, be able to empathize with people when you need to, and actually just relate to them. Have some type of people skills and self-care. So if you care about yourself, your upkeep of yourself, you're going to make sure those around you, and you're going to make sure your community's good. And you just have, like Chief said, you're just hungry. Like you've been there before. You know what it feels like to go without. You've experienced some things. You've had a unique or diverse upbringing. And so I think there's a lot of things that you could put into this profession as an individual, but most importantly, I think you just have to, like Chief said, have a good moral character. So.
All right, very good. Let's go on to our next question. We've been over this. It says, what experience did you have? This is for the officers. What experience did you have to get your job?
Well, I'll jump in. Pastor, I saw your plates on your way in. Thank you for your service. I'm an Army veteran too myself, so your service doesn't go unnoticed, and we appreciate it to our country. Before I became a police officer, like I just tied in there, I was in the United States Army Infantry. Once I got out of the infantry, I knew I wanted to help the community, but I really didn't want to go back to college, and I knew that I could get into the police department after doing a ride-along. An officer said, well, you can use your military experience in lieu of a college degree. So that was more motivating to me because I'm not much of a student anymore. After going to war to Afghanistan and stuff, I'd rather, be serving my community, doing what's right, and, so that's how I got to where I am.
I think the intriguing part about, experiences and becoming a cop is you could have any experience, right? He served the military. I worked at the Boys and Girls Club of Long Beach. It's not the same. However, I think the great part of the experience that I had, right, is being able to impact lives at a young age. And as a police officer, now I'm able to impact lives at any age of their life. And I think that played a crucial part in order for me to be successful. Takesha brought up a good point. The experience plays a huge role, but it's the overall picture. We want to make an impact in everybody's life. We want to make an impact in the community. So no matter what kind of experience you have, you could work at the bank, you could be a professional athlete, you could be working at the Boys and Girls Club, or you could do anything. And you just bring whatever whatever your upbringing is, whatever your history is, and as long as you have a good heart, you have a high moral character, right? And you bring it on to this department or any department, I think you're going to be successful. As long as you stay hungry, as long as you're willing to learn. So it doesn't there's not like a perfect picture of, hey, do this, serve the military, go get your bachelor's degree, go hand-to-hand combat, do jiu-jitsu or something like that. It's wide range. It's what can you bring to the table, what can you bring to the community? And so.
Very good.
And let me add real quickly, I think that's an excellent point that you see the diversity in background. We have an officer from Kenya, one from Vietnam, one from Brazil that speaks Portuguese. We've got an NFL player, former, sitting at this table. I bet you guys didn't know that. I'm going to embarrass him. I mean that. He played in the NFL. I mean, we've got officers in all walks of life. And I think the point is that there is no picture. We don't pull out of a certain pool. We're from all different walks of life, all different, because we want to truly represent our community.
Very good. Very good. And Paula over there trying to hide.
Can't hide.
He knows he can't hide.
Since Chief outed me, yeah. I mean, I did play a little bit. But I mean, like Jeff said, I didn't have any background in law enforcement at all when I started. I was brand new to it. I was a professional athlete for a few years. I'd rather talk about my dad because he played pro ball, Saints Hall of Fame, Bob Pollock, go Dad. But yeah, I didn't have any police experience. But one thing I did learn from being a professional athlete was I liked helping people. I liked the way the kids look up to you and being a role model and setting good examples. And I felt like policing was a good way to do that. To give back to the community, to be the example for kids and adults. One of my goals that I've recently discovered, though, is not just about giving back, but it's also about breaking negative stereotypes. So, I mean, as a black man, sometimes have their opinions of you before they know you. As police officers, the same way, people have opinions of you before they know you. So for me, it was twofold. So I feel like that's the reason I got into it. That's why I do this job. That's why I love it. So that's why I'm here.
Great, great. Let's go on to another question. This question is for everyone. Do you think the media, including social media, is pushing us together or pulling us apart?
I think individually, it depends on what kind of space you're in mentally. Sometimes if I get on social media and I see police brutality or something, depending on how my day is going, I can either react out of anger and, talk negative, or I may feel like spreading love, But as a whole, I think it brings awareness to the people. Obviously, police brutality has been going on forever. It's just cameras haven't been around. So now we're just starting to see it, and the country isn't taking it well. So I think it's a 50-50 thing. For sure, it brings awareness, though.
Yeah, I think it, like he said, I think it can do both. It just depends on what's out there. I mean, the way I like to look at it is, I mean, right now there's a lot of negative stuff. A lot of people have, negative opinions about police officers because of what's been going on in society. But one thing I try to point out to people is this: when's the last time you thanked your shoe for not falling apart? When's the last time you counted how many times you blinked or you took a breath? You don't think about those things You don't give credence to those things because they're doing what they're supposed. Your shoes are working the way they're supposed to work. Your eyelids are working the way they're supposed to work. Your lungs are working the way they're supposed to work. When things work the way they're supposed to, when they do what they're designed to do, they don't always get the accolades. And it's the same thing with police. There are, I want to say, majority of police officers do their jobs the correct way. They do what they're supposed to do. But you don't hear about those things because those are the things that they're supposed to do. People don't always give praise to what is considered normal or regular. The things that do get attention are the negative things a lot of times, and that's unfortunate. But at the same time, it's something that needs to be brought out and paid attention to, because that's the only way you can change something is to draw attention to it. So
Good.
Obviously, I agree with both. It's just how you perceive things. I have a significant other that's actually about to be a police officer. So when we see things on social media, we'll sit and talk about it. From the knowledge that she's giving me, from what she's being inside the police academy, I look at things different now. When I see videos of people saying police brutality or he couldn't have did, the police officer could have did this different. When I look at it from you guys' standpoint now, I put myself in you guys' shoes. When I look at it like that, some things is understandable of what police officers do. If someone is resisting arrest, you have the right to pull out your taser and say, hey, I'm going to tase you. If you're resisting arrest, some people are like, well, he have to tase him. All you have to do is dunk him and this. No, that's not what police do. If they're asking you to do something, do what's asked of you. If you're not doing what's asked of you, then yeah, you're going to, that's when you go to the wheel of your tool belt. So it's just, to me, it's how people perceive things. Some people will look at something like, oh, they didn't have to do this, they didn't have to do that. And then again, to you guys' extent, y'all have to go by protocol. Y'all, again, what you said earlier, you don't know the person's background of police. You don't know what people are going through at the time, so you don't know what's on their mind. So you do have to go home to your family at night as well as them. So if they want to go home, or if the other person want to go home, everything want to be neutral, you have to perceive things as it is and not as everything is going around. Everything is going around. You see negativity on social media, so when you get your encounter with someone, you're going to think it's going to be a negative encounter instead of staying calm and perceive it as it is.
Very good. This?
Oh, no, you was going to.
Oh, go along.
Okay, I was going to say that, yeah, it does do both, but I think on both sides, we have a responsibility, and I know as police officers, I'm sure y'all feel this, to educate. One thing that you mentioned early on, Chief, is like history dating back to 1960s and how everybody's family member may have had a negative experience with a police officer, so they're telling this child this or that. So I know in my opinion, for us, what we have to do is, like, I can't blame a 10, 11, or 12-year-old kid that's on social media that has access to it if they see something that they may not know all the details or whatever. They see a video of a police officer doing X, Y, Z. I can't blame them for being scared because they may not have been educated properly. So I think that the biggest thing is that when we do have these encounters, we have to find ways to educate these kids because they're the ones, at the end of the day, I can have a negative encounter with a police officer, or I can see a negative encounter, and when I have an encounter with the police, I know that was just one situation. I know this police officer is going to do what he's supposed to do. I know that. But it's our kids that don't know that. They don't have the ability necessarily to be like, this is all they see on social media or whatever, and then to make that distinction. And so I think just as a community, as players, police officers, our responsibility is not necessarily to focus on if it's dividing or if it's bringing us together, but to find ways that we can bring people together, educate, give them background, put them where they understand the history of police officers, police brutality, or whatever. We have to change that narrative with every individual we encounter. So I think that's, when it comes to social media, it's going to do both. You know, our job as a whole, and I say my job like I'm a police officer, but our job as a whole, and I know for us police officers, is that we have to find ways to continue to educate. That's all we can do. And honestly, like, a big thing is experience is our greatest teacher. So like every experience, every encounter that y'all have, every encounter that we have with somebody where we're telling them, hey, the Grand Prairie Police Department, they're phenomenal. We have to do that as well to be able to change. Like, so they may see something on social media and it's like, well, this is an isolated incident. You know what I mean? Like, it's trying to change that narrative with really with our youth, for the, you know, in a large part. Yeah, my bad.
Very good.
Can I add something real quick? Yeah, the whole purpose, the question is a great question, and that was the whole purpose of myself reaching out to the mayor and to the police department, because you don't need an education to download Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So same way Cam mentioned, same way, you know, Chief and everybody else has been saying, you know, it depends on your day. You know, mental health is a very big thing. We actually partner with Elevate Healthcare, a mental health facility that they have one in Arlington, Frisco, Dallas, and plenty of other places that they're opening up. But I believe that's something that as professional athletes, they're starting to talk about now. Like, you know, everybody's been mentioning Paul George. You know, he came out about it, and unfortunately they lost their series, so that kind of gained national attention. But just think about it, as Cam said, he opened his app, and if he was having a bad day, now he's viewing that video in a negative light. So imagine somebody with some kind of mental health issue viewing that, and you're not sitting there, somebody's sitting there to tell them, hey, don't post that. And so they go post something, and, you know, back in the 60s, if they had that German Shepherd out, there wasn't somebody there to quickly take a picture and they could send it out, and now somebody in Hong Kong has that same image. So now you have to kind of be mindful, and just like, you know, our men and women, you know, behind their badges, they have to be mindful, not only if they're, you know, using their tool wheel right now, but, you know, who's recording me now. You know, somebody that may not be used to all that attention, they think like, okay, this is a normal traffic stop, and now if I put this guy against the car too hard, or I say something too loud, I may become, you know, the next person that's, you know, getting interviewed, or, you know, receiving death threats, you know, something of that nature. So I feel like, you know, in a nutshell, social media can be a great thing depending on, you know, the situations. Like, I feel like this is, you know, a wonderful thing that, as you said, a lot more people with, you know, bigger bank accounts should do with elected officials. But it can also be a bad thing because things can spread like wildfire, and it's no telling where the viral video or picture came from or what the narrative is. You know, people have their own views on things.
Very good point, especially if I say something wrong, right? This is for Chief.
Lay it on me.
Do you believe defunding of the police department and putting those funds elsewhere will benefit the U.S. as a whole, or only stir up more controversy between authorities and citizens?
I don't think anyone in the country is seriously talking about doing away with policing and completely replacing them with social workers or other things. I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think that's a realistic conversation. I think everybody understands that there are certain circumstances where you got to pick up the phone, call 911, and you need a police officer. But what I do think there's value in is, and I think where this outcry I'm hearing in other areas has to do with, they want more social programs available to the citizens. I think progressive police departments have been doing it for a long time. And I think what the outcry is to get more of that. So the coach brought up, for instance, the mental health. That's a big problem today in our country. So one of the things that we're doing here is we have a program called COPE. I think this is an excellent example of something that many other folks in the country want to see their police departments engage in. So in a nutshell, what COPE looks like is if you or your family member are suffering from mental illness, you come down to the police department, and we can, of course, we got to verify the diagnosis. You can't go sign up your neighbor because they made you mad. But we will be able to flag your name, your license plate, and your address. So if you're an officer and you get dispatched to one of those locations, or you come across a license plate, or you run somebody's name, now suddenly you have an idea that this person has a history of mental illness. Here's some of their diagnosis information and their triggers. Now imagine how powerful that is. If you have someone that's paranoid schizophrenic, for instance, that's an incredibly dangerous situation for us. Maybe they hear voices. You as an officer know that going in, and you can adjust your approach. We have mental health therapists on our staff that if time is on our side, we can bring them with us. Or maybe bright lights is the trigger. You know that in advance. My point is that it's a tool to try to de-escalate the issue before it becomes an issue. And so getting back to defunding, I think what people are really saying is that they're wanting more. And I personally don't have an issue with that. I understand that outcry. I think we can do more. We can allocate some, and I think reallocate is really a better way to frame that than defund. Reallocate some of these resources to these social programs.
Sure.
I see only good coming from that.
Very good point. You made a point of reallocating. Maybe that's what we should put out, that they need to change the word from defunding to reallocate it to good programs, which you have.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that couldn't hurt. There are certain circumstances that police officers have to handle, right? If somebody is abusing their spouse and they're using violence, you need a police officer. If somebody abducts a child, you need a police officer. A social worker is not a good fit there. But what if you have somebody that's in mental health crisis? You've got a long rapport, time is on your side. Doesn't it make sense for you to have a team that's got that training, which, by the way, all of our officers have twice the state mandated amount, to go in there, slow things down, bring in the pros, and see if we can't get them the help they need? I mean, I think that is the spirit behind this defunding talk. We certainly don't have all the answers, but I think that there is some ground that could be made up there.
Very good. Anyone else? Now, that was a question for Chief, and I think that hit it on the head. I think we do need to have more programs to reallocate the money instead of defunding. That when they said defunding the first time, I heard, well, hold up here, now defunding. We need the police. We need the officers. Okay, here we go with another question, and we're coming to the end, but this is for everybody. I want you to really think about this question, and I want you to volunteer for it. Have you ever been on a ride alone, had a one-on-one conversation with a police officer or close family members that are police officer? If so, how were your views before that experience, and how those views changed?
I'll take this one. So,
You want to ride? Too.
so I graduated from Hardin-Simmons University in Abilene, and with a criminal justice degree, and I had to do an intern with the Abilene Police Department. So we were required to do, I can't remember the number, I want to say 60 hours our senior year with ride-alongs. So my first ride-along was with a cop. I'm not going to give out any names, but he was in the game for 17 years, so he was a vet. And his approach just to every situation, traffic stops, everything, was so chill. He was so calm. It was almost like LeBron on the court. He was just so calm about everything. And my ride along the next week was with a younger cop. He was in the game for 2 years, and he was really antsy about everything. I mean, we did like 10 traffic stops in like 2 hours, and I was like, we don't have to stop everybody, you know? But it just made me realize how individuals are different within the police department. It's not just the police department, everybody's the same. You know, it showed me how everybody has different perspectives on everything. And even on my first day of the ride-along, we responded to somebody getting shot at the pawn shop, which was crazy because it was like, all right, this is my first day. Is this how it's going to be? I'm going to people getting shot and stuff. So, but I was with the cop that was, was in the game for 17 years, and he was just really calm about everything. And I don't know how the newer cop would have been if we would have responded to that call. So, I mean, yeah, but it gave me a different perspective just on a police department as a whole. Just that whole intern was incredible.
Anyone else?
I'll go. I'll say the one time that I did, I was probably about between 6 or 8, and it was more so like a cop that lived in our apartments, and he basically like took us on a ride. Obviously, the cop car had a cage in it, so I mean it wasn't like the most fun experience, because it's hard back there. Well, for most people that don't know, but. It was fun that he took us on the ride. We just rode around the block, and he basically, talked to us, gave us ice cream. Your stereotypical, TV cop, mingling with the kids, just saying exactly what was on our minds. And so for me growing up, I always had the experience and the view on cops is, they cared about the youth and, that they wanted to see a change. They wanted to make a difference. And then, as you get older, obviously, your views can change just based off of your interactions. But I felt like the ride along as a younger individual really paved the way for me to kind of take things from a flip-sided coin, as I got older. So as Chief mentioned, the programs they have for the youth, catching your first fish with a cop, that kind of can make a greater impact, right, for somebody at a younger age in an at-risk community.
Ask the officers, this is not on the question sheet, but when you have a ride along, like if the Heat said, I want to ride along with you, do you change your personality when somebody's with you, or is it the same? I think he was just talking about something like that. Do you get a deeper voice? Or
I don't think they would agree to that anyway.
No, I mean, you have to be who you are. I mean, that's part of the experience right now with a police officer. Like you said, everybody's different. Everybody has their personality, the things that they go off of, or the way they respond to different things. That's just part of the experience, but it makes no sense to be fake, because, not only are you doing the person ride along with you a disservice because they're not getting to know who you are as a person and as a police officer, you're also putting yourself at risk and them because you're trying to do something that you're not used to doing, and if a situation happens, then you're kind of caught off guard. Then what? So it's always, I think, in any situation, whether it's on the job or whatever, you just have to be authentic, be who you are. Don't change, for anybody. I don't.
I've always thought that if you did get a ride along, that you're able to see the high demand for an officer. It's very dangerous. Give you a different perspective on what their job is. Give you a lot more respect for it. All right. This is for the officers, and you guys had mentioned this earlier. It says, for Chief, this is going to be for Chief.
All right.
This is for Chief. Why isn't the training to become a police officer longer? It takes half the time to become a police officer than it does a barber.
I'd fact check that one. Yeah, I would fact check that. I'm not sure how long it takes to be a barber. I'm going to guess.
They just changed the law in Texas.
Let me defer to my pro here. Go ahead.
All right.
So in the past, it's been 1,500 hours to get certified. Recently, just this past year, they decreased it to 1,000 hours in order to become a certified barber. And then It's funny because I got a haircut the other day, and I asked my brother, hey, how long did it take you to get your license? He's like, honestly, what you got to do is you go full-time and go part-time. You sign up, you do an hour of study, and then you go to school, and there's like maybe 30 of y'all, and one person walks in, and you just hope that person's going to sit in your seat. But then you got to complete those 1,500 hours. And then I asked him, hey, why is it 1,000 hours now? And he said, I don't know, but it is only 1,000 hours, and I think that's it's different amongst all police departments on how long an academy lasts. But like we said earlier, our training never stops. You guys becoming better basketball players doesn't stop. You can go to practices, you can go to have games, but the willingness and the eagerness to get better, to learn, how to do the Euro or a step back, a side step or whatnot, that takes time, that takes practice, that takes training. Same as our craft. In order to be, understanding of mental health, we got to go through a 40-hour class just specifically for incidents to how to address those individuals. And as our police department evolves, as the world evolves, for training purposes, we got to adapt. The laws change all the time, so for us, our training changes all the time. There's different practices. What you guys know back then as a travel is no longer a travel. It's a gather step. You know what I mean? So it changes all the time, and we got to adapt. And that's only something for us that we do, and we just can't settle. And it's the same thing for y'all. You guys can't settle to become better. So.
And let me unpack that just a little bit further about some specifics. So I don't have my barber license, so I'm going to defer to you on the amount of time it takes. But to be a police officer, you're going to get a 6-month academy where we're going to talk about everything from de-escalation. By the way, our de-escalation is built into all of our training, not just the de-escalation piece. But I mean, all the academics. You have to learn the penal code, the code of criminal procedure, the family code, health and safety code. I mean, all this stuff. Once you get done with the 6 months of the book stuff, then you go into your field training, right? So that piece is going to take you out another 4 to 6 months, give or take. Then on top of that, then you're on probation. And what that means is for at least another year, if you do something that's contrary to our values or whatever, you're an at-will employee, you would have to move on, okay? That's not to say that if you do something that's contrary to our values north of 2 years, you're still going to get walking papers. It's just more difficult, okay? So I don't know about the barber license piece, but I think 2 years is pretty rigorous. Yeah.
All right. Anybody else want to comment on that? I think Chief put it, that's a long time to train. All right. We got a couple more questions here, about 3 more. This is for Chief. It says officers, but I imagine, let me just ask the question. It says, what are the characteristics that makes someone appear suspicious? Is there a concrete list of examples of Pacific in police training?
No. That's the easiest way to answer that question. Look, I like to tell citizens, you know your neighborhoods better than we do. So just think about it. When you're going home, if you see something that doesn't feel right to you, your spidey sense goes off, then you as a human being understand what is off, right? So police officers get used to that over the years of, they're in your neighborhood, 5 days a week for 10 years, something seems off. Usually, Mrs. Smith's garage door is not open at 2 o'clock in the morning. This is weird. Why is her garage door open? That's suspicious, right? So you get to where you know those things. But remember, the other thing I want to kind of go back to something I said earlier. Some of it too is, and I think the spirit of this question is there individual characteristics of a person that makes us feel suspicious? And the answer is no, but again, it depends on the facts and circumstances. Remember my analogy, where if you stop a car for a taillight being out and someone is acting very odd or is petrified, an officer may not understand that the fear has to do with the way they were raised versus, because look, there are times where officers stop people because the headlight's out and the person is afraid, not because they're afraid of getting hurt, it's because they got a duffel bag of dope in the trunk, right? So the officers learn to pick up on nonverbal cues just through experience. You all have that training through the course of life. You know what feels wrong, and that just sort of comes intrinsic to being a human being, I think. But there is no list of, if the person looks up and to the right, then they are suspicious or not telling the truth. That's not the way it works at all, in my view.
Anybody want to thoughts on that? Yes.
I would say so. That is a great way to explain it. And so I guess just for like the general public, let's say somebody does call and say, you know, the garage is up, or, you know, on some other similar instance. I know it's very difficult to determine how to approach the situation, but what would an average day citizen, or what should they expect when you get those calls or those checkup calls? Should the cop approach it with his gun out, or what exactly would you guys do?
Sure. So the answer is it depends. First of all, I always tell the citizens of Grand Prairie, if something doesn't feel right to you, you call 911. I don't want you to call the non-emergency number. You pick up the phone, you call 911. We got a whole team of outstanding dispatchers that are going to take your concern, and then we'll go out and figure it out. You know, if you go up, everything looks okay, but the garage door's up, you're going to knock on the door and ask Mrs. Smith, is everything okay? Because she might be having a medical event, right? In which case we need to get her medical care immediately. On the other hand, if you see 3 men climbing out the back window with masks and pearls hanging out of their pockets, you might get your gun out, right? So it just really depends. And to try to give a set of circumstances that each officer would just kind of go through a if this then that chart. If our team needs that level of guidance, they don't need to be wearing a badge and a gun. We want people that use good common sense with the goal of protecting the people that we work for. And that's what we try to do every day.
Okay. 2 more questions for the officers. What is the most important thing to learn as a police officer, and how does it feel knowing some people don't like you and some look up to you?
I would say, I think the most important thing to learn as a police officer is that every person you encounter, you need to treat them as a human. Treat them with respect. That's the most important thing. I get asked all the time, have you shot somebody? Have you used your gun? And I said, no. Even as a female officer, a lot of times just my officer presence and the way I respect people when I encounter them has got me through a lot of situations where I haven't had to use force, or I haven't had to use my weapon. And so that's the most important thing, I think, for me, being an officer for 8 years, is to learn how to treat people, and that everybody is human. And when you just have respect and talk to people the same way that you want to, like I've arrested people the same way I'm sitting here talking to you guys without raising my voice. And I think that's the most important. Of course, certain situations dictate different things, but I think most important, I think, would be just treating everybody with respect.
I'm going to ask with a follow-up. Right, the last question for everyone. What is next for the Dallas Heat and the Grand Prairie Police Department?
I defer to you, Coach.
Well, hopefully more events like this, and then obviously, you know, post-COVID, or what the city feels, you know, as a safe measure within these times, to bring the community together, not only with, you know, when this gets out to them in regards, you know, to the police department, but also as well as, you know, reaching back out to the youth, and not only the youth, Because, I mean, in this day and time, I feel like, you know, the adults need more care and love, you know, with us than the youth does. So whatever we can do to bridge that gap between the two and do it together, I feel like that's a big piece. And us obviously getting ready to, you know, play basketball in the near future.
Steve?
Well, we won't be playing basketball. At least this guy won't be playing basketball. Detective Sanza's on our team. I'll defer to him. Look, we have the same goals. We want to do everything we can to show our community that we police with empathy and love in every interaction every day. So that's our goal. I will tell you that it's been a mission of our public information team also to reintroduce the Grand Prairie police officers to our community as individuals. There's a lot of things that we have going, but I still heard a couple guys say you didn't know the programs we have. By the way, grandprairiepolice.org, it's got all of our programs on there. Check it out. We want to reintroduce our citizens to who we are. I don't want them to know Chief Cesney. I want them to know Daniel, and I want them to know Kyle and Takesha and Robert and all of us, right? So the goal is, I feel like if you know us as individuals, love is going to be a lot easier, and that's our goal.
Awesome, awesome. We want to thank every one of you for your time, for being here. Thanks to Amy Sprinkles and Chelsea Kretz and Kevin Rowe for helping to make this event possible. Also want to thank Officer Hodges, Gerald, for the hard work, the new position that he's doing to better this community. Want to thank all of you all for what you did today. God is pleased when you come together on one accord. The enemy can't defeat it. I want you to remember that. When you're on one accord and you're trying to do something good, evil is always going to come. But you that are on one accord in God, you're going to defeat it. It's not because you said so. It's because God said so. It's because God said so. Because God says so. So I want to, if you don't mind, pray with you that God's speed will be with you and with even the cameras, even with the people here. And Chief, I want to tell you, you're awesome. What you've done for this city and what you're doing for this city. And Mr. Mason, Coach, appreciate you. You guys are awesome. And for the team and everyone here, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you right now in the name of Jesus. We thank you for this time, this table of round discussion, God, where we brought out things and talked about things, and you're pleased. I can tell when you're pleased because I can feel your peace among us. Now, Father, I pray for each and every one here, from the cameraman to the people that are in the building. God, you said in your word, no weapon formed against us shall prosper. So, Father, we just come thanking you for watching over their families. I pray mightily for them. I pray mightily for their jobs and their work. I pray mightily for this city. And I thank you for what you're going to do and what you're doing. Now, Lord, I pray mightily for the President of the United States, the leaders of this country. I pray mightily for the leaders of this great city. I pray mightily for the men and women in the armed services all over the world. I pray mightily for those that are preaching the gospel and those that are teaching and preaching. And Lord, I thank you right now, and we give you the praise, for you are worthy of the praise. In the mighty name of Jesus Christ, we thank you. Amen. God bless you.